Okay, awesome. Welcome to another episode of Collective Wisdom by Demand Collective. Today I'm joined by Talar, CMO at Phonexa, an all-in-one marketing automation solution for calls, leads, clicks, emails, SMS, accounting, and more. Talar is also co-founder and co-CEO of the Wonder Agency. She's been in marketing for over 8+ years, working across a variety of verticals, including marketing automation, HubSpot partner agencies, and even video games. Thanks for joining us today, Talar.
Thanks for having me. And dang, you got my bio down. I'm like, I need your script to update my profile. I love it.
I'm just trying to be your biggest hype man. That's
I
all.
love it.
How's your week going? What's the news? What's happening?
Oh, well, it's been kind of cloudy in LA. The week is going great. It's been busy, especially I don't know if um, you know, uh all of you are experiencing kind of the crunch of the last few months, and trying to get a bunch of stuff out the door to close out a strong quarter, but that's kind of where we're at. But things are well. What about you?
Yeah, Q4, right? That's where that final sprint happens. I'm great. I'm great. Super excited to have you. I was wondering if you could maybe just to start us off with a little bit about your journey as a marketer, how you got to be a CMO at Phonexa. I saw you sort of started your journey as a marketing coordinator at Eisenberg. Is that
hmm
correct?
Yeah, so I had a role before Eisenberg that was agency side. So I spent most of the early part of my career, well, I'd say early part of my career into like sort of it turned into 8 years agency side. So I actually was straight out of college running political campaigns, political grassroots campaigns. So the fun fact was I was a volunteer, and then I got out of college, got a job at a nonprofit I had been volunteering for. And the part of it that I really loved was actually community outreach at that time. And this might like date or age, like give up my age a little bit, but Obama was running, and we were just seeing like social light up in terms of a really new strategy on how to run presidential elections. And I think a lot of campaigns were thinking about how to use that strategy locally. So I was a community outreach like coordinator straight out of college, and they're like, here, like pick up the phones, call people, talk to all these organizations that endorsed this candidate or this project. And so I was like, why wouldn't I just build a Facebook group and start running ads on Facebook? But nobody was really doing that. So I was like taking a beat from the national elections and started sort of learning about it in real time. Lo and behold, one of the guys who was kind of, one of the members who was also volunteering owned his own marketing agency. They did SEO and PPC. So that's kind of when I went agency side. I started off in local, kind of like local sort of local marketing, local SEO, local PPC. And so it was a lot of driving foot traffic to, um, you know, uh, different locations and mom and pop shops, and then also companies that had franchise locations. And then from there, I wanted to use those skills to work with larger brands. So that's when I joined Eisenberg. And my role there was kind of twofold. I was working in helping produce videos as a part of integrated campaigns for Xbox and Microsoft. That's the first time that I actually started using the Microsoft HoloLens, which was at the time a B2B marketing plan on Microsoft side. So they went out with the HoloLens, and they went to market with larger institutions claiming productivity and efficiency with mixed reality and using that in your day-to-day life.
Mhm.
So worked on some games, console marketing. And then the next agency I went to, I was like, well, I want to now see a very different company size. So I went to an agency that was one of HubSpot's largest partner agencies. And it was at B2B enterprise SaaS. And so I spent a lot of my career there. I loved it. And then I was like, I'm ready to go in house now. I'm ready to commit.
Yeah.
I had commitment issues, and I was like, I'm ready. So I joined like two Web3 startups. I was their head of marketing, and then Web3 was super volatile last year,
Yeah.
and I decided to start my own consulting business. And then I ended up at Phonexa as CMO. And I was grateful to still be sort of consulting with startups that I would meet along the way that were either friends or people I met through the course of my career.
Yeah, yeah, that's an amazingly varied career.
Yeah, it's been a windy road. It's like some people just grow up in brand marketing or in certain functional domains, but I like the breadth. I like keeping it interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like, you mentioned kind of jumping in between like B2B enterprise, starting off in like Microsoft and Xbox and things like that. Like, how does that inform your current strategies? Like, I feel like that's a lot of experience that people in your position don't often have.
Yeah, I've toggled in between consumer marketing and B2B. So at the Web3 startups, there were both components. We were building creator platforms and also platforms for larger companies like Paramount and Hello Kitty, Sanrio were dropping their own NFTs on our platform. But
Mhm.
then I had to manage the consumer marketing side, which is like, how do I get actually people to believe that having this digital collectible is going to give them access or entry into more value from this brand. And so I found that throughout the course of my career, I've toggled in between consumer and B2B marketing. And I think partly that's become a little bit of a value add in the sense that when I think about B2B marketing, I think about the consumer context. And I also think about how the a B2B company impacts the end user, right?
Yeah,
It's not always the case where a B2B company impacts an end user, but chances are you do with your B2B companies that are working with you. So I think that changes the way that you tell stories, and it changes the way that you think about what you should be saying as a company. And we're in that transitional stage right now at Phonexa where we're very features driven. We would talk very much about our capabilities, but we didn't talk very much about our end users and what they're like and what is part of their culture. Like who is the archetype here that loves working with us, and then what do the end users that of their companies feel when they work with them. And that creates a feedback loop that is still very, like, you're touching consumers, the people
yeah,
you're selling to are consumers. So I think that's kind of left a lot of impact.
yeah, yeah. And I'm sure those sorts of conversations can be really difficult both on the team level and on the executive level because there's so much change that comes with that, right? On a
Yeah,
tactical and strategic level. What
yeah,
sort of advice would you have for someone? I've talked to a lot of marketers who are entering these new leadership roles, like head of marketing, especially. How do you
yeah.
find a balance between speaking the language of executives and the board versus taking all of that and distilling it into digestible terms for your team?
That is a wonderful question. And it's a wonderful question because I think questions that are hard for me to give a straight answer to, it usually means that I'm still working on it. And I'm still formulating what I think is the best path for me. I think we're all really different in how we navigate even our personality types and what our strengths are. And so I think you firstly, in order to create change at an executive level, and on a strategic level, and then turn that into an action plan that gets executed differently from what had happened before, right? You have maybe the same team members, maybe some new team members, right? And you're basically, the boat was going this way and you're saying, no, I'm coming in and this is the direction, right?
Yeah.
That leaves an impact on the executive team. It also changes the behaviors of the team. Maybe they need to learn new skills. Maybe they've changed roles and you've restructured, which is something we did at Phonexa when I joined. And
Mhm.
so I think there is three things that you need to keep in mind. The first thing, and I was reminded of this week, was that your A team is the leadership team. I'm a first time CMO, which means that I have functional core competencies. I'm really great at demand gen. I've had a lot of experience in brand marketing. And in demand gen, I kind of bucket in paid media and performance marketing as a key component. And I have a
Mhm.
lot of experience in content marketing. But those are core competencies, things that I can do, right? If somebody told me, go run these campaigns, go build a video campaign. I would know how to do that functionally. What changes is on the first thing is that your A team is the executive team. Their buy-in, your relationships with them impact what you are enabled and empowered to do. And then you will have a team that's understanding you, like why you set the goals the way you do, why you're turning the ship. And keeping that line of communication open, make sure that you and sales are going to market together, you and CS are expanding together. And I've worked really hard in trying to figure out how to do that with the other personalities and capabilities at the table. The second thing is, when on the team level, when you're changing the ship, you now have you have some semblance of buy-in and cooperation and agreement and alignment on the executive team. The next thing is you've got your team, right? And you have to spot, I've now audited, right? And audited in the sense, what is everybody working on?
Mhm.
How are our channels performing? How does that inform our revenue data? Where are the channels that are driving revenue? Have we even tested in certain channels and that we need to be exploring based on our ICP? So when I came in, I audited, I built out new ICPs that were not different. We just built them out, right? We institutionalized them. And then we said, now what is our strategy? So we built that strategy. I built that strategy, worked with our executive team to fine tune it, went back to my own team and said, here's how we need to restructure. Here's what we need to focus on. But the trust building piece there was really important, because somebody getting new skill sets or doing something differently from what they did before, that requires them trusting that you're going to support them, guide them, and sometimes even get on that field and show them how it's done. Bring in mentors to help them get to that next level, give them courses, guidance, all the things that they need to feel empowered that they can change the strategy with you, and that they're a part of that team, that you're not somebody walking in and changing the playbook.
Yeah.
And I think that creates trust. And I think sort of those are the things that that I tried focusing on, and I'm still working on it. I'm still working on each of those areas every single day to make sure that there is continuous alignment on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you manage like when you have conflicts between like departments and like, say one of the biggest misses that I see with a lot of teams is sales creates their goals in a silo, marketing creates theirs in a silo. And you look at like the down funnel metrics and the goals don't support each other for being
Mhm.
attainable, right? And that's how you end up seeing like what 60% of sellers aren't going to hit quota this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that I walked into sales and marketing not really talking very much.
Yeah.
In the sense that, like, how are we going to market together? There might be talking right around the water cooler, metaphorically, but right, like there wasn't a how are we going to market together, and
Mm-hmm.
and then also that conversation wasn't happening as actively with product and CS, right? So and it wasn't anyone's own fault. It's more of like, you just get used to working in a silo. You want to get your stuff done
Right.
and you want to do it the best that you can, and sometimes you forget, like, oh, if I just connect this dot regularly enough, I'm going to do this better. So one of the first things I did was making sure that the go-to market with sales was aligned. We didn't go the full ABM route, but
Mm-hmm.
we aligned our lists. Our lists were different, if you can imagine. We were not talking to the same prospects. We were running primarily search ads and search campaigns, which is still, revenue generating channel for us, though a little bit expensive, as many of you might find. But we basically aligned our lists and our target audiences. We had our ICPs, and then we said, let's like do these, with our outbound sales motion. Let's do the scripting here together. Let's break down these lists. And then let's talk about how we're doing attribution. Let's talk about what it looks like when you align your lists and there's marketing influence revenue and then sales outbound revenue. How do we actually track that to make sure sales feels incentivized, marketing feels heard? And let's treat this as a joint revenue team, right? As much as we can. And I wouldn't say that we're 100% there, but I would say that at the very least, we're coordinated on our event strategy. We're coordinated on the lists and the types of clients that are most valuable to us and have a higher lifetime value. We understand and have the same definitions on what those things are. And then the other thing is marketing, being judged by opportunities and as our key KPI,
Yeah.
and adjusting from, we still report on high intent leads and low intent leads, but we've broken them out in two categories. So we have high intent hand raisers, and those who are more sales ready based on the forms that they fill out, and then the leads that are coming in from offers or content or different pathways that demonstrate low intent. And we figured out how to automate, like giving them more content that they like, so the sales team can focus on the high intent hand raisers. And then we are tracking the volume on what turns into an opportunity, what channels are working for us, what influenced those steps, and being diligent in reviewing that with sales on a monthly basis.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great call out, dividing by intent. I see a lot of teams who are sort of working from a blended CAC perspective. And so like that customer acquisition cost is going to look really different when you have them together versus looking at them individually.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think it's like, we look at channel CAC, but it's like even channel CAC is like hard, right? You kind of have to look at it a little bit in conjunction with one another. It's like, what campaigns am I running right now? What is my paid campaign CAC based on each campaign and each channel I'm working on? And when I look 3 months down the line, what's like, how am I recouping those costs, and is that client expanding? And then that feedback loop is really important from CS to help define CS and sales, who's typically on top of their accounts as well, and keeping an eye on them through their sort of account management experience with us. So I think yeah, you can't really look at that blended CAC for all MQLs that enter your system. You kind of have to look at it by channel, by campaign, and then by high and low intent, and
Mhm.
and then sort of justify your costs that way.
Yeah, yeah, because I think that's important for a few reasons. In particular, when you're talking to a CFO, they always want to see, what channels are cost centers, what's direct ROI, right?
Right.
And there's that, age-old sort of fight where you have to explain to people that the buying journey is very rarely linear,
Are we
right?
going to talk about attribution, Brian? We're
Oh,
about to talk about attribution, aren't
I,
we?
what we're about to talk about is how to tell a CFO, hey, man, when's the last time you bought a $20,000 product off of a single get a demo ad on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
right? Making that fight. So when you advocate for these channels, how do you really spin that narrative that doing something like brand creation and brand familiarity ads on LinkedIn isn't just a cost center, that it lifts up your other channels?
Okay, so it's still, again, we're still working on it.
Yeah.
But there is two things I think in the arsenal that are starting to happen. So when basically how we're like transitioning away from it now, but how this has been done so far, and we're moving slowly away from it, but we're hiring a demand gen manager right now to help us actually get this reporting set up and integrated. So if any of you know anyone, please let us know. Like, shameless plug.
We'll
um,
share it with the community.
but essentially we were doing original source contact properties in HubSpot. And then we were doing last click attribution on all of the leads that entered the system,
Mhm.
right? So the data that we have from the last 2 years was based on those two components and how they impacted attribution. So kind of problematic, right? How we're changing this is to essentially update our HubSpot contact records to identify last click touch points for each stage in the buyer's journey and the conversion rate across those individual stages.
Yeah.
And then to basically to at that point also, so that's one thing. So you can actually see when an MQL turns into an SQL, the percentage of activities or touch points that resulted in that stage change was X, right? So you're basically doing by stage attribution, and by stage conversion rate reporting. And you can set that up in HubSpot. And if you don't use HubSpot, you can also do it in Excel by pulling your data. The second thing that we have already implemented is self-identified reporting, where on all of our forms it's how did you hear about us, and allowing them to tell us, right? And so this has been socialized a lot on LinkedIn lately as something that should be done, and I agree, because it's what does someone remember from our interactions, and then the memorable things become a second data point outside of the stage change data that you're
Yeah.
capturing. um, and then how that changes the conversation with finance is, then you take that report and you say, when we're generating MQLs, right? I don't want to talk about whether MQLs are dead or whatever. We still use them, but they're leads, right? They're leads that are generally in the firmographic. They've like filled out a form at some point, but they have not really expressed sales interest. That's how we define them. So for an MQL, it's basically telling finance, like, when we go from an MQL to an SQL, these are the channels that work. When we go from SQL to opportunity, these are the channels that really work. And then when we get to close one, these are the stages where we're lagging, where sales is lagging, where we need more support. And then these are the things that people say they remember about us in terms of channel activation. The other thing you can layer on here, which we're working on, is lift reporting. How likely is a deal going to close from Google Ads than they will from LinkedIn ads, right? Is there a direct correlation between lift and likelihood to close? So we're actually using hockey stack to see these lift reports so that we can better understand like the influenced revenue in greater depth, and get that, like, here is the lift. If it's 50-60% from LinkedIn, and then I'm looking at 10% from Google Ads, then we're not closing those deals in the same capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I don't hear a lot of people going that granular, which is really exciting, because I think it's a lot of the discussion around it can be really reductive, but I don't want to get too deep into attribution because that's a discussion we've heard a million times. But I did appreciate how hyped up you got about it. What do you feel like is a big, like, what's your big hot take? Something that you feel you hear a lot of and you're kind of like, no, not for you.
um I don't know. Okay, so I don't know whether this is a hot take, and maybe it's just more of a, like, roll my eyes thing,
Okay.
but not in like a bad way. It's just, I think marketers have the tendency to define and redefine, right? Like, category creation is such a big word that we consistently use, right? And it's not that I don't believe that you can create a category. I actually believe that that's one of the ways to create dominance in a market, especially as an early entrant. It's
Yeah.
create the category and define it. It's what HubSpot did with inbound marketing. You're kind of seeing Audience Plus do it with owned media right now in B2B, and I think they're very smart to move in that direction based on the platform they've built. And so I don't, and so you saw Drift do this with conversational marketing, right? Which wasn't really a category.
Right.
So I don't disagree with the premise that creating a category and defining that category is important. What I tend to shy away from is the need to redefine something that doesn't need to be renamed. I think that you need to look at your business, and you need to, like, there's going to be a lot of noise on LinkedIn and on a bunch of social channels around, let's call this X now, right? Or MQL shouldn't be MQLs, they should be like insert another acronym that somebody has thought up, right? Because it defines it better. And that's not our natural tendency as humans to say, as humans, and especially marketers, to say, once this name is changed, it means something else. And so now you've redefined it, and it matters in a new context. And I think that's all good and fine, but I don't think it should be where our sights are set. I think when we get too caught up in our feeds and we get too caught up on everybody else's playbook on what's working and how they've renamed something, and now we all need to call it that, we forget that we're not running the playbook that's good for our business. And you need to keep an eye on the ball, and you need to keep coming back to, is like, I'm going to call my MQLs, right? But am I helping define what purpose they play in our organization? Am I acting as a conduit to constant learning and education on how marketing is changing? I don't need to change my vernacular to do that. And so that's kind of one of my, like things, I guess.
Soapbox. That's your soapbox.
Yeah, that's my
That's
soapbox.
I think marketing as a whole, I agree, is definitely in need of standardization of
Yeah,
terminology, right? Like we have so much of the same terms flying around meaning something entirely different at different companies.
yeah.
And I
If
think
it's
there's
gonna, and if it's gonna help to, sorry to cut you off,
like
align with CS and use the same word you've always been using, but teach them how you define it a little bit differently, that's totally fine. Use the
yeah.
same word if it's going to create alignment in the org. Just know and educate about how you might think of that thing differently than the predecessor or how it was done before.
Yeah, yeah. So you touched on category creation in that, and recently I think it was through Phonexa, you had a webinar where you talked a little bit about leveraging review sites, right? Like G2, for
Wow.
example, and how to really create a strategy centered on that category, right? Could you tell me a little bit about how someone who, for example, something I ran previously was, hey, let's leverage existing category traffic by hopping on the coattails of these larger brands in the category, right? How would you give someone sort of tactical advice for how to implement a plan that takes advantage of that?
Yeah. So the one terminology that we've probably seen in our feeds is like community go to market. Probably a lot of us are following along on how to do creator creator connection building in B2B. And I actually really, I think the G2 conversation is actually a part of that conversation because it has to do with share of voice. And I think that whether it's review sites or whether it's user generated content, whether it's your partners amplifying your content and contributing to it, or your customers doing that, I think all of those things kind of fall into what I'd call a heavy focus on community. And so that G2 conversation, I think is once it, I think it's released next week, but I'm excited by it because I think, we've all used review sites for a while, and I don't think that we you might have a listing on G2, that you're kind of getting in market buyers if you're a software company or whatever else, that they might be searching, and you're getting that, not only the data from them on that audience, but what you're also doing is like you're making sure your customers are talking about you on those platforms. But sometimes we forget that those reviews are not in a silo. It's not like just G2 that they're useful for, that
Yeah.
they're useful on the channels that you manage on social. And it's not just throwing up that quote on social, it's thinking about how can I activate with this customer in a way that tells more customers like them that their problems are things I understand. And that can't be really done just through a case study video or a review. And I think the B2B marketing community is shifting to doing to consumer marketing in this direction. It's like, how do I turn my customers into loyalists and content creators? How do I do that with my executive team? How do I do that with my partners? Then how do I do that with the prospects that I want to bring into our fold and into our community?
Mhm.
We at Phonexa, we not only use review sites, but we are building out our own media content pipeline the latter half of this year. And we are leaning into the culture of our ICP, which are affiliate marketers.
Yeah.
And you've seen the YouTube videos, right? There's a certain culture around affiliate marketing and how to generate revenue and live your best life. And we are going hard and taking somewhat of a risk and leaning in that direction and embracing it. And then
Mhm.
I think and then using our partners as the thought leaders to kind of fuel our content engine, bring them in as your influencers. Don't forget that your loyalists are your best advocates, and you really need to think about them as like evangelists, right? And you need
Yeah.
to give them the tools to do that properly.
Really, really great answer, Talar. I really appreciate that. I guess just one final question before we dig into giving other people a shot at questions. Who is the best demand marketer you've ever worked with and why?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard question.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. This is a hard question. You know, I think a lot of people I think a lot of people have seen sort of, uh, Chris Walker's content over the last few years. And I think I think there's something to be said about him being able to surface certain things that were real concerns in B2B marketing and helping talk through them. I wouldn't say that I've worked with his team. I haven't, but I feel like there is something to be said for the influence that his content has had on me, and just my thinking overall, right? I haven't had to work with them directly to take value from the content or the podcasts or the information. And it's probably a generic answer since most of us already kind of know him. But I think that, or like have seen his content, though I think it's impacted my thinking over the last few years. But I also, I think, follow a lot of consumer marketers that still impact my thinking. One of my favorite CMOs, I met him on LinkedIn when I was, still at a manager level, and he was more than willing to hop on a call with me and connect with me. And till this day, he's probably one of those people that's also toggled between consumer marketing and B2B. And everywhere I've seen him go, I've seen him just crush it, and not in demand gen, just in building a renewed sense of purpose for the brand. And so I don't think that you need to have a demand gen sort of person to influence you. I kind of, it's ranged where I kind of see great brands being built, and I try to bring that into demand gen function as much as I can. Because we're the heart and soul of the marketing team,
we're the fuel for the fire,
We're
right?
the fuel. We're the fuel. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Talar. This has been great. Does anyone here have any questions they want to share? Feel free to drop them in the chat or to just turn on your camera and ask.
Yeah, I actually have a question. Hi, I'm Kelsey. So something I've been kind of running into is feeling like I've kind of just been bucketed into demand gen and haven't really gotten much exposure in like brand or product marketing. And I've always been in B2B and never had also exposure to B2C. So what would you say, like now, especially going up to a CMO level where you're kind of expected to be the expert across, like how would you say that you balance that one and maybe areas that you don't feel as like expert level on? But then also, how would you suggest, like I am currently open for opportunities. Of course, I'm looking at demand gen opportunities, but I'm afraid that that just kind of continues to bucket me and doesn't give me that exposure elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think I'd say that I'd spent most of my time agency side and in demand gen. That 5-year stretch I had with the large HubSpot agency was focused on building out the demand gen function and working with clients directly. And I'd say like I would consider that my core competency. So we have something that's similar.
Yeah.
I would say there might be things that you can look for in your next role that might expose you to other components. So, for example, one of the companies that I got connected, that I met through Audience Plus, who I mentioned before, they a lot of the demand gen marketer terminology they've changed to be audience marketers, and audience marketers are content focused as well as brand focused, but they have demand gen skill sets. And so I think something that you might think about is, can I find a role the positive thing is most demand gen managers span more gamuts than you might imagine, because we touch so much. So we do content marketing. And I say we because like I'm part of this, we do content marketing, we do paid media, we do touch all these components. And so you are more varied in your skill set than you might think you are. And it might just, and so I'd kind of say, look for something that is adjacent, but that allows you to sort of take on a lateral title that still allows you to lean into your core competencies, but maybe introduces a new area and need that you could grow in. And I think most employers would find that that's something that they'd be excited about. You can grow in a certain category, but also bring the value as a demand marketer. The second thing that I'd say is working agency side was probably one of the best things I did to get varied experience. You might consider looking at an agency in your next role so that you can get exposed to different kinds of clients and in different contexts. That will give you an on-ramp to, I think, like diversification, not just in your role, but in the types of companies you've worked with. And that might allow you to see, like, even if you have one client that's a little bit more consumer focused because the agency might be a little more varied in their clientele, find a place that might give you enough options on client types where you could get more exposure, and then go back to client side and say, I actually really loved this industry and this particular competency. Let me do that in-house, and it might open and broaden.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I hope that was helpful.
Super helpful.
Another question. If you are working with ABM and sales are trying to go whale hunting and saying, okay, we want like senior director, VP, CEO of large companies, but there are just so many of them. How do you balance sales desire for whale hunting from another side, getting to manager level, getting to other people in the organization?
Would you say that when you say whale hunting, does that also change the company size? Or are you referring to it as they are going more senior and they're not thinking about the buying committee? That's what okay.
If sales are going more senior and do not consider the rest of the titles interesting, how do you structure the marketing programs, not only to find the list for sales they can work on, but also do something else? Or maybe you don't.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know how well defined your ICPs are, but when I go through that exercise, what I define is who is the decision maker, and then defining who are the people that influence that decision maker. So I think that first, documenting that and socializing that so you have a shared understanding of who those people and players are. Because what usually happens is sales just wants to close, right? They want to have the highest likelihood of bringing in a deal that's going to stay with the company. And they have a very hard job to make that happen. So where I kind of like to step in is to say, let's have a shared definition of all the other players here. Let's reset and say who influences this decision. Let's document it together, because chances are they're also in conversations where this decision maker is bringing in 3 other people into the next demo, and they're all talking about what they need. And you've got those recordings, right? You can watch those sales calls. So what are those other people asking? How does that impact how marketing influences those people that are coming into the room, maybe at a later stage or in an earlier stage? So I'd say use those recordings, use those sales calls to define who the influencers are in the decision, document it, review it with sales, make sure they are brainstorming it with you. They agree on it. They say, yeah, they do bring the IT guy in. They do bring, make sure that shared pool of meaning is there. And then marketing needs to segment that messaging. It's what is the sales collateral that we can help with for this audience versus this, and then sales gonna have the bank of stuff to use and go out into the world with. It could very well be that the sales that they have is just for that VP. They only feel confident talking to that guy because they don't have enough guidance on how to talk to all the other people, because it's just not documented right, or maybe not actioned in a way that they feel can help them close the deal. At the end of the day, they need to see value in going after the other ICPs, and marketing can help them do that. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
I think we've got just another minute or two left. Eric, did you have a final question you wanted to ask?
Yeah. First of all, Talar, this has been amazing. I've been, thank you for doing this, and so many golden nuggets. I really resonate with the marketers just love to define and redefine stuff.
Yeah.
So
I've been holding off on a social media post about
Yeah.
that only because I feel like I feel like it's a thing, you know. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
thanks for having me.
we had a conversation where it was, so we were like, MQLs are dead, MQLs aren't dead, and then someone's like, MQLs are just high intent leads, and then it boiled down to like, what do we define MQLs as? And everyone was saying the same thing, just with different definitions. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. I just had a quick question that I thought might be interesting. We got a couple of members in Demand Collective who are in the job search. You're hiring for a demand gen manager. If you were to put yourself in that person's shoes, someone in the job search, or maybe even applying to the specific role, like any mistakes that you want to make sure to avoid in that process, and anything, unique ways that you would approach it?
Yeah. You mean mistakes through the application and interview process?
Yeah, as a demand gen person looking for a job, what mistakes to avoid, and maybe what tactics to focus on to stand out in the process?
That's a great question. It's interesting because I think it's been really hard to find a really great demand gen manager, which is really interesting. It's been really hard to find one for us. Like, we're LA based, so we like, that's important to us, and it's been like kind of a little bit of a hard search. And I think part of that is because, so the things to sort of avoid or keep a lookout for is, I've talked to a lot of candidates who this is a very basic interview thing, but it's like that, like, didn't really do their research before they got into the interview process. So it was like, we were just one of a bunch of other companies that they were talking to, which is totally fine, in the sense that, like, when you're in that process, you really want to find what's right for you. And sometimes you don't have the time to do that deep dive or that whatever, But it's interesting because I think something that would stand out is, if I'm a demand gen manager and I'm interviewing, and in the past I've done this, I've logged into SimilarWeb, gotten a free account, did an audit of the digital data that was there, figured out who the two competitors were for that client. And I picked out 3 observations I could use in that interview so that it felt personalized and real. And they felt like, whoa, like, you knew that about our data, or you knew something about me that wasn't just publicly available. And I think that can go a long way. Just a quick swipe of understanding, like, hey, like, their SEO traffic dropped in January. Like, it might have nothing to do with demand gen, but it's a nugget, and it's a ticket into a broader conversation around what that demand gen director or VP or CMO that's hiring, like, what their problems are, right? It gives you a sense of what they are struggling with. I think that's huge. Or even just an industry take, like an opinion on the industry that is thoughtful. I think those are I think that might be like the main thing to stand out. I think it's also, for a demand gen manager, when I'm reviewing the resume, like, I think we are more prone to put in the tasks we are responsible for. I'm also a big, like, I'm task oriented, and I tend to be execution focused. A lot of demand gen managers I talk to are similar. You've got a lot of things to do. I would say, put the needle moving numbers, make sure that they're there. So if you are responsible for running a demand gen program with, and your paid media budget was $10,000 a month, and you were able to create efficiencies, like, put it down, right? Like, it doesn't matter if it was a $5,000 budget or a $10,000 budget, because that startup or company on the other end might be looking for that small budget, not the large one. So be honest about your experience, but make it quantifiable in terms of value, because I want to see that the impact of the numbers. Like, even if you're more junior in your role or whatever else, like just a understanding of like how you were able to create impact from a quantifiable perspective can go a long way. And I don't see enough resumes that do that.
Amazing. I love it. Yeah, it's interesting how our whole job as demand marketers is to think in a buyer-centric fashion about what they're looking for and then present compelling offers. But then when it's time for us to do that in like tailoring our resume or in the interview process, it's like, oh, it didn't work. Like my brain stopped working.
I know. Well, it's like that.
So many times.
It's like that with my personal brand. Like my CEO, you know, and I have had so many conversations about like, build your personal brand, like be out there, you know, and I'm just like, I do this for other companies. Like, how should I do this for myself? You know, it's a very different beast when you're representing you than when you're, you know, trying to create value for, you know, an external. You can have that perspective when it's not for you.
That was a really great breakdown. I think we're a little bit over time, so I think this is a good place to cut it. But thanks for everyone watching, for joining us for another episode of Collective Wisdom with Demand Collective. And thank you to Talar for being our exceptional guest today.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, I really look forward to seeing the work you continue to do with Phonexa and to seeing you continue to spit all the fire you spit on LinkedIn. And for those who listen or watch this, if you're a demand marketer looking for a tight-knit community of demand gen experts, be sure to apply to our community, Demand Collective, at demandcollective.io. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend. Thanks again, Talar.
Bye.